Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the south-afrifur podcast. You're listening to myself, Ivik Wolf here, and today we have two very special guests in Mog Moogle, who has, well, actually both of them returning guests, but one of them is Mog Moogle and the other one is Tempo. And yeah, it's very good to have you guys back, and now together.
Hello. I think Mog is still muted there. Oh,
No, I'm good.
he
Okay,
has returned.
okay,
His Moogle antenna has tuned back in.
okay. That's actually very good. We were having trouble with that antenna a bit earlier, so that's obviously something very useful. Yeah. And also returning, somebody who you probably haven't heard in a month now, Scratch.
Hello.
Hey. All right. So, premise of tonight's podcast, for those of you guys who haven't been checking our Twitter, if you're just joining in, anything like that, we have two writers from two different publishing houses here, particularly to sort of talk about writing, talk about the process, talk about the way that we, I say we, but like they as writers approach the entire writing process, the publishing process, all of that kind of stuff. And this is going to
you write articles.
I do, but like, I mean, if I have an editor, that's like a nice thing. If I have to self-edit, that's like not so nice. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call myself in any way a serious writer, so yeah, I just do it for fun.
You don't get paid for
Well,
write?
I mean, hopefully
I
that
don't
would be
get
why
paid.
we're doing it too.
What's this money thing? Like, that's
Yeah.
another thing that we can talk about as well. Like, what exactly is the payout of writing a novel?
Well,
we might as well start there. Why not?
okay. So to start with money, a lot of venues where we read stuff, you don't like if you go on SoFurry or Fur Affinity or something.
Mhm.
Obviously, you're not going to get paid there, and there are other anthologies that are print anthologies that also don't, or ebook anthologies that don't pay. Like especially if they're like starting out or they're a charity, they're like giving the money to a charity or something like that. They often won't pay, and
Mhm.
then there are anthologies that are like Heat and Fang and Roar. What's the new one? Claw.
Are you
Where-
mentioning just like all the sexy ones?
Are there other ones? Then there's
Roar
new
is
labels.
Roar is non-erotic, so
Oh yeah, fair enough.
Right. It's just it is the counterpart to Fang, and so they are often sold together. But like
The
and they
non-sexy.
have a lot of authors in common.
Okay.
Then in those you typically get how much do you usually get paid for those? Like a penny a word or something, Mog?
half cent a word is usual.
Yeah, something like that. Like you don't get, so you'll be submitting a story that's like 8,000 words or something, or less. Sometimes as many as 10,000. I guess the longest short story I've had is like 12,000 words, but it's tough to find a venue to do that because it just takes up so much of their available space. Like what's the longest short story you've put out, Mog? And what's like a normal one?
Well, most of mine are under 8,000. However, the recent Fang one, after the edits, it doubled in length, so it's sitting at just over 15.
But I mean, $4,000 for that's a fair bit of cash, though. Right?
Hey,
No,
where
you
are
said
we
a half cent a
$4,000?
word, right? You said a half cent a
Yeah.
word. So I was thinking 8,000 words.
Yes,
That's 8,000
So
cents.
that's
yeah,
8,000
that's-
cents. Unfortunately,
Yeah, sorry, 800 then? $400?
A cent. There are 100 cents in a dollar,
Yeah.
and so it'd be $80 if it's.
I'm not a
it's a-
mathematician, okay?
It's okay. That decimal point has escaped you. It's very small.
But I mean,
Um,
$400 is nothing to sneeze at, though, is it?
Oh,
$400
not
so
400.
$80 is the normal payout for 8,000 words.
Yeah, I usually
Or
get
40.
paid anywhere between $30 to $40 for everything that I get published.
if you get published in something like Heat that's really well established, they do a penny a word, which is
Mhm.
why I immediately calculated it as $80. But like, because that's what I just submitted to last night.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, like expecting to make like, you know, enough money for a nice dinner out is about reasonable.
So
And,
like
you know,
a half year's work sometimes.
no, okay, Mog, how long does it take you to write like a normal short story? You know, 4 to 8,000 words.
That's a difficult question right now because for the last year I haven't been very productive. But I can usually write 4 to 8,000 words and get it completely polished up. If I'm really in the groove, I can do it in a month.
Yeah, like, and it all depends too. Like, there's a lot of like groundwork where you're like, man, I need to learn how these characters act. I need to, if it's a setting I'm not familiar with, like, imagine writing something set in your hometown versus something set on, you know, in an Antarctic base. If you have never been there, you have to do a lot of research, or it
Yeah.
won't sound convincing.
Sorry.
And
Yes,
so,
my Fang story. Yeah, my recent Fang story. I actually it's set in New York City, and I've only been to New York City once. So I ended up doing a lot of research of like where the characters were going, what they were seeing, what they were doing.
Whether or not they were
So there
walking
was a
here.
lot of yeah.
Haha.
You know
true.
what trains they were taking and all kinds of stuff. So there was a lot of research involved in it.
Right, and the research, for me, the research often takes a comparable amount of time to the writing. Like, if it takes me X number of hours to write a story, like physically type it, that's I often have done it, you know, that much research over, you know, scattered over days. And so, like that, if I'm really in the groove from like the idea of the story until through the research, through writing it, and then drafting and editing, I usually that about a month maybe. If I'm really doing great, I can do it in like 2 weeks. Like if it's a series I already have down, like it's part of a series that's ongoing, and I already know the characters and I already know the setting. Like if I wrote another Windfall story, it would probably only take me like a week or two. But it would have if it's a week if it was short, 2 weeks if it was kind of long. But like that's like the optimum. So if you're writing like something that you've never written before and they're on the moon, you know, like you don't, or they're in the future and you need to map out the world, you know, things like that. It's going to take you a long time. Like I've had stories like, oh my, uh, there I'm working on a like Robin Hood story that I've been working on for about 6 months, and I'm not ready to start writing it because I've just been researching and world building, and that's just how it goes. And then to finish up the money thing, you so then there are novels where you, instead of getting a one-time payment, you get royalties, and so usually you get 50% of whatever the net profit is for that book. So like if your book costs $10 and it you know, if it costs $10 on the shelf and maybe it cost $5 to print, you're probably getting like $2.50, like $2.50 per book,
Okay.
which is pretty good. Like that's why you see, and the reason that you see some of the, like say Fur Planet, they only really do a price point of 10 and 20, I think, right, Mog? Like they don't have a lot of other stuff.
Um, for the most part, as far as novels go, I've not submitted my first furry novel yet. I'm only in the short story venue in furry writing at this time.
Okay.
Which is really, short stories are a great way for writers to like experiment and spread their wings. Like when you tie yourself down to writing a book, you're stuck writing in that same tone with those same characters in that same setting in that same style for like a year.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you will, like, even just writing Windfall 2 is coming out at MFF, and
Mhm.
it is a collection of short stories attached to a novella. Like a novella is just a short book.
Yeah.
And so it's like 80. Let's see, 40,000 words or more is a novella. 40,000 words or less is a novella.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get past like 10,000 or something. And so that's like, oh, I don't know, Goosebumps books are novellas. Like what other things are that long? Like they're short. They're like 100 pages or something.
Heart of Darkness.
Is a novella.
Heart of Darkness. Yeah, Heart of Darkness is a novella. You're right.
Yeah, things like that are. That's what a novella is, and then you step up to novels, and that just means longer than 40,000. And so like Six is Wild is like 150 pages or something, and it's like 55,000 words, and then
Yeah.
Windfall is like 250 pages, I want to say, something like that, and it's 77,000 words or 88,000 words, something.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, and the funny thing about it is that Mog is entirely reasonable in wanting to do short stories, because say you're writing like an 8,000 word short story,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, like that takes a month. Well, it doesn't take you. It doesn't just take you 10 times longer to write
Yeah.
10 times more words, because it's much more complicated. Like the plot threads are more complicated because there are more of them because you have more space. So it actually takes you longer proportionately than the multiplier of how long it is. So, I've Windfall being 88,000 words didn't take me. It wasn't like, oh, it took me 11 months. No, it took me like a year and a half to get that book done. And yeah, I worked on other projects occasionally in there, but that was really about as fast as I could go on it. And that's kind of just like, the longer things get, they scale up rapidly for how long they take. So yeah, but anyway, then you receive royalties once a quarter.
Once a quarter, okay.
So you kind of, yeah.
Like, how fast do these books really sell? Like, is it because of the? I mean, I obviously, you sort of mentioned a bit earlier, I do reviews now as well. My first review was now recently published for Thurston Howell. But I mean, like, how, what kind of, say, for people who do reviews, for instance, like, what kind of help does that actually do for you guys? Like, if somebody does a review for you in a particular, like, for a publishing house or anything like that, how does that work?
Well, I mean, if it's a review for an anthology, that's great. It can get people to look at their work. It's not going to give the writer more money.
No.
It just means that they're going to, like, you're going to want to look at more of their stuff and go to their FA and whatever else, like go to their Furry. If they have books, then yeah, like always, if you're reviewing just one story or something out of an anthology, I would always throw in a sentence that just says, this person has also written these things. If you like them, or you can find their stuff here. But like, reviewing books makes a huge difference. Like having books reviewed, like when Six is Wild got reviewed by Roundup magazine, which is the magazine of the Western Writers of America, that probably sold me like 100 copies in a month extra.
Okay.
Like, just spiked up by 100, and like based, because it was, oh, okay, like my normal sales were kind of stable at that point, and like I sold probably an extra 100 copies because they wrote it up and talked about how different it was from everything, and then they said, hey, check it out, and then they listed the website and people bought it. And that's very like it doesn't sound like a lot to make an extra like $200-300, but like when you're a writer, that's actually a fairly sizable chunk of your income. A lot of like having a few of those in like a quarter makes a huge difference. Like, oh wow, cool, I made like an extra, I got mentioned on I got brought on a few shows. Like, oh, the same thing kind of happened when I was on the radio a couple times. Like I was on National Public Radio twice, and both times it spiked my book sales. And having that happen means that, oh, cool, I made an extra $1,000 or something. And so it makes a huge difference, and that's why you see writers on all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Like this podcast.
Yeah, fair enough. And Mog, you had something to say about this?
Yeah, I was just going to say that universally, all furry authors want more book reviews.
Yeah.
It's something that's called for a lot. You know, it's talked about a lot in the Furry Writers Guild. How to get book reviews and things like that. It is just tremendously helpful for an author of anything, anthology, novel, whatever the case, whatever it is. A review helps so much.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, a negative review in such a niche market as us can literally sink a book.
Make or break it, yeah.
Well, and another thing too is that like there's an emotional side to it,
Mm-hmm.
where like I totally go and look at reviews of my stories in Heat or whatever, because I am vain like that.
Oh, is that vanity? I didn't realize. How is
I don't
that
know.
vanity?
I'll do it. You thought
How
what?
is that? How is that vanity though? There's no way that that's vanity.
I don't know. I just assume most things I do are vanity. But the like when I like, you know, it makes me really curious and I want to know. And so like having even if the review has points where they're like, I didn't like this and this felt out of place or this whatever, I didn't like this. As long as they're talking about like, you know, they've clearly read the book.
Yeah.
Clearly, like nothing frustrates me more than people who have reviewed stories and I'm like, I'm pretty sure you only skimmed it. Like, why are you bothering to write a review if you haven't skimmed it? You're doing a service. You're doing a disservice to everybody then, because then your readers go, oh, okay, I now know how this book works, and they don't, and they might have liked it if, like, I've even had people review it positively and skim it and give readers a mistaken impression of what books are like.
Okay, because I mean, I mean, obviously, I recently did a review for. Oh goodness me! It was. Man, now I've got to find out what the bloody name was. I'm sorry, I'm very bad with names. Did I mention that at some point, like ever?
It's okay. You look it up. I'll keep talking about reviews.
What the fox? Like, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and because that's something that I want to talk about at some point, but we can shift onto that eventually. Like with those kinds of reviews obviously coming up for say short stories and things like that, I mean, like when it comes to anthologies, like you don't necessarily have as much time to spend on every book, for instance. I mean, otherwise your like review becomes exhaustive. Like that's been my first experience now, is that like I had to try to keep most reviews down to like half a page.
Oh yeah. No, and people don't want, like, readers want to be informed quickly. If they had to read a huge thing if they had to read a page to understand what my 10-page story is like, they're gonna just eventually be like, I'm just gonna read the story. That'd be worth my time. So like, often like, you know, summarizing, like talking instead of giving like a plot summary. Like I see that sometimes with reviewers, like they're like, oh yeah, like here's a description of the events of the story. I'm like, that's not as important as a prospective reader as what will make, you know, everyone likes some story. Tell me what I have to be into to like this one. And like that's and it's both like helpful to the reader, you know, of the review, and it's also like encouraging to the writer that somebody understood what they were going for. Like that makes you want to write more because you're like, cool, okay. Like even if they're like, oh, westerns aren't my thing, but if you're into this, this, and this, you'll like it. Like, and then as far as like what things to review, I don't know. Like, I mean, I would say pick the things you are most interested in because then you'll actually want to read them. Like, don't worry about what other people will like. Like, just get, you know, like you don't have to review, like, not to pick on like Kyle, but like you probably don't need to review every Kyle book because people are going to read them anyway. Like, you know, he is so well known that there are many people reviewing him. And same thing with like, oh, I don't know, like people who are sort of in the mainstream but are furry, like Ursula Vernon. Like you could read her book. Her books aren't as widely read in the fandom, but they're pretty widely read outside the fandom. And so like, it would, if you are interested in that book, read it and review it. But if you are like just feeling like you're obligated to, like if you, I don't know, like if some book comes out that's like a sequel to, like to a book that was really popular, maybe you don't need to prioritize that one if you've already, like, if since that one is going to be more of the same, like most sequels are, like that's what I want in a sequel, is more. But yeah, Mog, what do you think is, like, how would you determine what's important to review in the furry fandom? Like obscure people you need to raise up, or like, a little bit of everybody, or what?
Yeah, ideally, I'd like to see everybody get a little bit of review. Of course, you don't. The people that just do exclusively online stuff, you're not going to see many reviews on their works. Other than the occasional critiques in the comments sections. But as far as the reviews go, just anything and everything, anything will help. So I would say I would like to see more reviews across the board of novels, anthologies, individual short stories, e-publications, our news websites, and everything.
Mm-hmm. Right, no, totally, because people don't think about reviews as part of the writing ecosystem, but like, they think, it's publishers, it's writers, and it's readers. When really, like, reviewers are also important, because without any sort of like sorting or curation,
Yeah.
nobody really knows what to read, and you can't possibly read every book that comes out in the furry fandom. You can't read every short story on So Furry or something.
But I mean, and sort of speaking about that, like obviously, say now Thurston Howell has like obviously I think pretty much gets people in to review books for them and things like that. I mean, like I'm working with them currently, and I'm pretty sure that other publication houses do have the same kind of thing. I'm not necessarily sure. Like I've only worked with Thurston now, so I'm not necessarily sure about the process in respect to how other people get other people to write reviews for them. But I'm going to assume that the process is very similar. It's on volunteer basis, a large amount of the time, and I think that's probably one of the better sort of systems that could work. That like people who want to read books. I mean, like the way that I see it is that like I get to read a book, irrespective of the content. Like I don't read as often as I'd like to, so make it my job and I'll read it.
Yeah, no. Typically what I've seen is that people, like, publishers will either be contacted by or have an existing relationship with reviewers, and then those people can get, like, usually an ebook version. Like usually that's just for logistics sake, it's an ebook version, and then they read it and then they talk about it, and they then post a review about it, and like the publisher doesn't have much of a say over whether or not that, like, about the review at all. Like it's just, yeah, whatever you wanted to say about it, put it up on your blog or put it up on whatever. Like I've had like, a romance novel blog review my stories that wasn't furry. Just like, boom, let me talk about them. I'm like, okay. And she put them up there and she talks about it, and that was great. And I'm sure that got me some sales somewhere. And so like, but yeah, like having like Fur Planet and Sofa Wolf, they both want to have reviews on their website, but it's just not feasible. So it seems like they're moving to having them on like Goodreads and like third-party sites and like Amazon, stuff like that. And then Dogpatch Press wants to have, like, they would love to have more book reviews. Like they would love to have more people doing them, because you just can't have, Fred cannot keep up. Fred Patton can't keep up with every single book that comes out.
This is true.
And
yeah,
and so it's just, so if there are, if the more you want to review, awesome. Like, even if you are just completely like, you know, not, you don't want to get too involved in it. Just, you know, listeners out there, like, if you just like had strong feelings about this book you read, you can go on Amazon or go on Goodreads or whatever and make an account and just post about it. And even stuff like that helps, because then, you know, like, you know, because like when writers write up their work, that's fine, but that doesn't always, like, they're always going to tell you it's super good. Like, we will always, I'm not going to write a book I don't think is super good, and I'm not going to write a short story I don't think is super good. And
I mean, but what about the people who are, you know, kind of skittish about even saying that? Like, I mean, you know that you've written a good book, but you're constantly asking yourself whether it really is a good book. Like, do you,
I've never asked myself that, but I assume other people have.
Yeah, I mean, I would.
Yeah, like, as far as like if you're a writer looking at reviews, like, you have to kind of take them with a grain of salt. Like,
Yeah.
Mog, I'm sure you have also had reviews where you have been like, you clearly didn't get it to the person. Like, I never answer them. I never respond to them. But like, has that happened to you too, where people just don't get it?
Oh yeah. Mostly on the online stories.
Yeah.
I've never had a review in the furry publishing scene where it was like, well, you just clearly didn't get my story. But I've seen it online quite a lot.
Yeah, because it's so easy. Like, it's so easy to, I skimmed the story and here is my thought on it, and it needed more wolves, so 1 star. You know, or whatever it is. Like, I only read stories with fennec foxes in them. It's not many fennecs. Now.
Yeah, 1 star.
You know,
what are bats?
What are bat? What is a bat even?
Yeah, like,
1
I mean,
star. Don't make up a hybrid species.
Yeah. How does it fly?
How does it even fly? It doesn't have any feathers. Is it a pterodactyl? What is it?
When and where do they poop? And
people like that need to seriously just, I don't know.
Like... But anyway, so yeah, on the topic of reviews, like, view the fandom, I would say, as a wiki. Like, view the fandom as like everybody has a part can play a part if they want. And some people go on a wiki and they write an entire article and they say this and whatever. And some people just pop into the conversation and add one little thing. Like, I have had people who say, like, who their entire comment on a short story on my on like, say I post on south-afrifur NFA, like, somebody will comment, you know, I liked this story because I thought that the main character was funny. And I will be happy that that happened, and it will make me write more. Or whatever. Like, I like this story because I relate to so-and-so. Okay, I like that. You know, that makes me know that I'm connecting with people. And so the more you review, even just on those websites, the more it gets people writing.
Yeah. Is it the whole mention sort of perspective? Like, you've mentioned me, therefore some people, 1 person or 2 people are going to go, hey, okay, this is actually a very interesting thing.
And like, as far as writing longer reviews, like, all I ask for when I coach people on how to write, like, because we've talked about how to do critique in my writing classes. When I talk to people how to critique a story, long or short, whatever, I tell them, find 1 thing you liked and 1 thing you didn't like, and go from there. Like, because then you will always be like giving it a fair shake. Like, you won't be completely going, oh, ooh, I love it because I love volume 37 of this series. I loved all previous 36 volumes of this series, and, you know, it's just amazing. 5 stars. Well, cool, but like, what's 1 thing that you didn't like about it? Because then it'll make you look at both sides of the coin a little bit. Like, because no story's perfect. And so, like, what did I not like about it? Oh, I wish there was more. Even something as simple as that. It was too short.
I can't believe it went 34 books.
Right, whatever. My shelf broke. You know, whatever it is. Like, because the, like, go from there and then talk about, like, like, I know it's, kind of, it's easy on the internet to just be like, I'm gonna leave a bunch of sassy comments, another story about foxes. Oh, how creative, or whatever, like, or whatever it is. Like, that's great, fine, but like, go through and imagine that you are telling a friend about the story. Not that you're telling your cool internet fans hypothetically about the story. You don't have to be Yahtzee on zero punctuation. You can just say, like, if I were telling a friend about this book, how would I sum up? Because you can talk about the plot, but talk about the plot for like, maybe a few sentences, and then just talk about what your impressions were, what stood out, like what you remembered really well from the story. Like, oh, I read the story the other day and it had this scene where this happened, and it was really cool because the guy described it like this, and that's all we want. Like, that's all we need. Like, that's all that a reader is going to care about is, ooh, now I'm curious that this happened. Like, I'm curious. I want to know about this character you said you liked. Like, oh, this character really made the book for me. Let me tell you more about this character.
Yeah.
Because then your review will be different from everybody else's review.
Yeah, because it's based on personal opinion rather than...
Yeah, like what your tastes are. Like, Mog, what do you want in a review?
Okay, so I'm going to plug the regional anthropomorphic writers retreat here.
Did want to actually speak about that at some point, but do go on.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I can get into more detail later, but basically, I attended RAR this year, and it was an amazing experience. But one of the best things that came away from it was learning actually how to critique stories, how to give and receive critique. So it had like major points, like you cover the plot, the setting, the characters, things you liked, things you didn't like, and it was really in depth. So I would love to see more of that. It's hard to do that, like Tempo was saying, on a short story, because it's you don't want to read a page, a 1-page review of a 10-page story. That's kind of pointless.
Yeah,
an author will. Like, we totally will.
Oh yeah,
don't get us
sure,
wrong.
But...
Like, we'll read like your term paper on our story. We don't care.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. Oh, there comes that idea of conceited again. Okay, cool. Sorry.
Coming to you live from the United States, it's Tempo.
All right. So, those are a couple of aspects on like how you'd like to be reviewed and things like that. But I mean, have you ever sort of felt almost forced to write a particular piece because I mean, like, say Thurston Howell or any of the publication houses are running like, a short story thing and anything like that. Do you ever sort of skip out on a particular topic because you don't feel like either comfortable with the topic itself or anything like that as writers?
Oh yeah.
Well, me personally, I do. Yeah, there's anthology calls that I skip altogether, either because I've got way too much on my plate, or the particular theme, I just can't think of anything that would be a good story in that theme.
Okay.
Yeah. No, same here. Like, that happens to me all the time.
Because I mean, now we've actually covered this a little bit in our previous interview with Mog, but I mean, like, obviously in the anthology that I was reviewing, I had to pick up Teabags, for instance. Now,
oh good lord.
Yeah, both of them.
Let's see, 34 minutes. Okay, I got some over-unders. I got to pay out on that one.
We should perhaps explain what Teabags.
Yeah, the best and greatest story, which is it's a principle that you attempt to find all the things that you shouldn't do in writing, and then you write it like that. Is that a good review of the entire principle?
Yeah, so Darkin made a list, and in this list he did 25 things that he repeatedly saw in the heat slush pile that authors should not be doing. And I managed to put 24 of them in this 1,400-word story.
Does that include both of them? Like, was it 1,400 for both of those stories?
No, okay, so there is... well, the other Teabag story that was in Furry Frolics was actually written by Cirska Greyraven, and it's a spiritual successor to
Yeah.
Teabags.
But
So, but no,
Okay.
I'm talking about the original. The original
Yeah,
Teabags
yeah,
had
yeah,
24 of the 25 from the list.
like, I mean, does that hurt at all? Writing like that?
To write,
know
oh
that-
yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead, Mog.
Oh,
This is your field of expertise. You are now known for having written this, so I will let you take. I am but an
Yeah,
amateur here.
It was difficult to write because while I was writing it, I kept wanting to correct myself. So I would make a mistake, and then fix the mistake, and then have to go back and undo the fix that I just did. It's like, no, this is supposed to be bad. It's got to have the mistake.
It's like a professional musician playing wrong. Like it's like
But
you
on
hired,
purpose.
like you, right? Like it's like you hired like an orchestra musician to play wrong, to play the violin wrong
Like-
for a
Like,
TV show.
like Stairway to Heaven on a banjo.
That's
Right.
not a bad idea though. Like it's actually sounds
No,
pretty
dude,
good.
come
I've
on.
I've heard the cover before. It's not that bad.
Come on, that's sacrilege, is what it is.
But anyway, so because like so much of writing, for me anyway, is learning to like you start practicing a skill and eventually it becomes second nature, and that just becomes part of how you write. And so learning to stop and do it wrong is actually really difficult. Like when I write examples for my class, when I'm up at the board, I have to think of an example on the fly. It's sometimes
how to
really
write
hard to come up
badly?
with like a super terrible, obvious example of how not to do it.
You should
'Cause
write
I've trained
Teabags.
myself not to think that way.
Yeah, I honestly like after reading both of them, I believe, and I sent a message to Thurston at one point. I told him that I took an entire week to get back to reading the rest of the stories after reading those. No offense. It's like it's interesting because like I couldn't like I knew that they were good in their own respective for what they were trying to do. And I think I said I remember saying as much in the review that for what it attempts to do, this does it the best. But
It's because it's like experimental film.
Yeah.
It's avant Mog.
but I also mentioned that it was like going onto DeviantArt or onto like one of those other Wattpad, I think was the other one. But going to like worst, like least viewed,
Oh,
right at the bottom, and reading those first. That was kind of how I felt about it. And
Or
again,
lowest ranked.
yeah,
Yeah.
lowest ranked. That's the one. Yeah.
avant-garde, avant-garde awful.
But it wasn't bad. It wasn't like terrible. Like you could see that there was a thread that was there. So I mean, it does definitely have. I know that I've read on various occasions now, while being on a Discord group and being slightly bored and or attempting to buy time for something, randomly just like popping up. Particularly, I think your one of your stories, especially with the idea of teabags and just reading it aloud to an audience, attempting not to laugh myself actually. So I mean, for the idea of comedy, it definitely came out as something like that. I think that it's for the idea of being a writer and then having to go against absolutely every thread of your being to be able to write that. It takes balls actually. Like it really does. Like yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Like the entire idea is pretty interesting. I think we should probably do it more often. That's my personal perspective.
Well, and it's sort of a like you have to know what the bad you have to know what the bad stuff is to put it all in there.
Yeah. And I mean the list is there. If anybody finds it, I'm pretty sure the list is out there. For those of you guys who know, like do read What the Fox at some point. There's an entire list there as well. If I can remember. Yes, it is there. But yeah.
What's the
Huh?
Mog? Can we find that Dark End post? and just throw it in
Oh
the
man.
Yeah. Actually, wait, hold on. Is it the story itself that you're thinking of throwing out, or?
No, the
No,
25.
it's a-
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
the,
Okay.
the
Okay.
rules.
Okay. Because I don't think that's NSFW. That's pretty safe safe to put out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I know.
No.
no, he's
No,
looking.
no.
Oh, okay.
I've got a link to the tweet thread. I just
Yeah,
had to
that'll
find it
do.
in my Telegram.
Yeah. Do you know what's in it? Like, I'm on Darkhand's Twitter right now.
The well, the whole list is actually in What the Fox. Well, I think it's missing like 2 from
Right.
from.
Just? Can you remember one phrase of that so I can search it?
I tried to do that not too long ago. Like
Right. Well, while you're
story is just authors' sexual exploits and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Let me find that one. I'll search it
Okay.
right now.
While
But
you're-
anyway, so to continue.
So I mean, obviously there are particular projects that do come around that you'd be interested in writing. Has there ever been one that as like a project that you started that came from an external source, like where we're sourcing this particular story for this particular anthology, that you started and then weren't able to complete? Is there anything like that where it comes to either of your experiences?
Found it.
Cool.
There.
Oh, you found it quick.
That's the advantage of being like on a computer instead of a phone.
Right.
But the so they're totally like most projects I have worked on have come from I think all I suppose have come from some external thing, like if you include like being inspired by finding something, like let's see, like I got on this whole Robin Hood kick because my wife bought me a book on the history of books in English, and
Mhm.
it was like this beautifully illustrated like glossy book that was full of illuminations, and I started wondering, like, okay, well, what kinds of stories could I tell with this knowledge that I was soaking up from this about how books were written and how books were used? Because like back in the day, the reason we have margins in books isn't because we had a bunch of leftover paper. It's so you can write in the margins, because
making notes.
you're right, because what would happen is back before the printing press, you would have people would just write books by hand, like scribes would write it out, and then they would sell it or whatever, and then you'd buy it, and that would be prohibitively expensive for most people to go and just buy whatever book they wanted, because someone had to physically write all the words. For even the cheapest copy would be just someone writing all the words again. And so the thing is, like, a lot of these books were very like practical, so they would tell you like how to like run, how to be a blacksmith or how to run a farm or whatever. And so then you'd make your own notes in the margins,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody else eventually would inherit that book from you, or like buy it from you or whatever, or you would have your version copied, and then your marginalia would be part of the book. And so it was almost like a slow motion wiki, like you were contributing to books that way by like subsequent owners would all write their observations on it. So like say you were reading like an alchemical text or something, oh okay, or like say you were reading they would add like, oh well, I researched this and this actually worked, this is a faster method to do this, and this is this hardly poisoned me at all when I did it. And like things like that, where they having all this new perspective on how books work made me go like, okay, well, what character could I write about who would be reading a fair number of books, but in like the 1100s or something in English? And I'm like, literally the only character I could think of who would be doing that sprang to mind was Maid Marian.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, Yeah. Maid Marian would be reading a ton of English books, but also in other languages, would be familiar with even like high-end books that had like, illuminations and such. Things like that. Like it was, you know, and that informed it, and that kind of got the ball rolling for this whole new project. Like Mog, what's an example for you for like how you've been inspired by something external to write a story?
Oh well, I've dreamed a few plots, or I'll watch like a documentary or something on a particular historical period and be like, hey, I want to write that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's yeah, the external sources come into play all the time when I'm looking for inspiration for my stories.
Documentaries
Very
are
rarely
great.
are they.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yes. Very very rarely are they events that actually happen to me that it's like, man, I got to write this down. There are a few cases of that. I wrote a few police stories. Um, that some of them were, obviously fiction, but they had events in them that I actually encountered as a police officer. So
Mm. I forget that you were a police officer before again.
They liked him because he could come in through the second story because he can fly. He's really small. He'd just come in through an open window and just be in there, and then he'd arrest them.
What
you're under
is
arrest,
it a
Kupo.
Right? Yeah. No. Exactly. Actually, so it's an important. We should pause this entire interview to tell them the story of how Mog knew me before I knew Mog for like 10 years.
All right. Yeah, we should go for that. Let's do
So
that.
so there's this game called Morrowind.
Yes.
Small
and
game, really, just like
It's very indie. I don't know.
Yeah.
Furries probably don't know about it. There's only like lizard people and cat people in it.
It's niche.
And
very niche, yeah.
it's very right. No, yeah, it's yeah. And so having there's with any of the Elder Scrolls games, there's this big modding community where people make mods, and one of them was at like the guy who does 3-Panel Soul, Ian McKellen. Damn it, the other one. It's Ian something.
Not McKellen, I'm assuming. Sir.
What's the,
I'm
Sir
gonna
Ian
butcher his
McKellen.
name. McConnellville.
But yeah, it's something like that. But the 3-Panel Soul guy, he also did Mac Hall. He had the specific way that he had ended up drawing Moogles that people really liked and was really cute, and it was a little more relatable than some of the like really stylized Final Fantasy ones. And
Yeah,
so
my persona is actually mostly based off of Ian's style.
All
yeah,
right.
like once you see them, like like they are more furry. They look like a more normal furry. So they have like, they have the antenna thing going, but they also are like a little more like they're a little more human shaped, and they're a little more like they have like
Cute as heck.
they're cute as heck. They have like Mog. How would you describe them as different from the Final Fantasy stock Moogle?
They're a little less rounded. I mean, like you said,
Yeah.
they do look more humanoid.
Not so much like a sprite.
They
Yeah.
right, yeah.
They have more than 8 bits.
Yeah, they have
not
more than
8-bit
8
sprite,
bits.
like forest sprite kind of thing.
Oh,
They,
okay.
I heard it today. Drink
They
Sprite.
have right. They have a bit more musculature. They
They have open
Moogles
eyes,
are
if I'm not
typically-
mistaken.
They do have open eyes. Yes, my
Yeah.
persona has open eyes.
Yeah.
So
And it makes them more relatable and stuff. But yeah, like, and so, but they're still like, cute little, bat-esque guys. And so I was big into Ian's stuff at the time, and he released this mod, and it added Moogles to, like, he worked with a bunch of other people and added his style of Moogle to the game, like as a playable character. Like you could play as Moogles. Moogles populated the world, and like this was actually, like, from what I recall, like a pretty ambitious like mod. Like there was a like Mog. Were there a lot of mods that added a whole new race to Morrowind?
Not too terribly many. There was some that did like the Teskey style races and stuff like that, but there weren't too terribly many. Like the major ones I can remember are like there was the Dwemer mod that added
Yeah.
playable Dwemers, the Teskey lizard race, and then pretty much the Mog mod. Those were like the three biggest ones.
Yeah, and like the Dwemer are already sort of in the game and stuff, and yeah, like so, but they didn't have voices, like because he just didn't, like that was one more thing that they would have had to do, and so I was hanging out with a friend of mine and looking at it and whatever when it had first, like the first release of it, because we'd both played Final Fantasy, and I was just like, as he was goofing around, like playing the game with the Moogles in it for the first time, I was reading all the dialogue to him in like what I felt would be a really good Moogle voice.
Mm-hmm.
And this rapidly descended into like, you know what happens with when furries like talk about something, like, oh god, you should totally do this, and like so eventually I just started recording like samples and stuff, and eventually we just did the whole array of responses. Like in Morrowind, you only need like, I think it's like 200 sound bites at minimum to have a fully voice acted NPC race and playable race.
Yeah,
like because they just
Yeah.
It's not terribly many. They I mean Morrowind only had what, like 5 voice actors?
yeah,
Which explains
most-
a lot.
most characters in Morrowind, or like in Morrowind, just didn't have voice acting. Like if you just, whoever you ran into,
Hmm.
and so that meant that it was relatively easy for me to, get in there and just record, because you just had to record like 5 or 10, really happy to see you greetings, 5 or 10 kind of happy to see you greetings, and so on down the line until they hate you. And then like a bunch of grunts and attack noises and stuff like that, and like a runaway noise, like an idle thing they might just say, right? And so this resulted in here I've obtained the folder of
Mhm.
all of the voice acting.
Oh,
I am
no.
I am Dropboxing it to you now.
How old were you when you were doing this again?
17 or 18. And so let's see here. Ivik, do I have a?
You're certainly nicer than the Ordinators, Kupo.
You're certainly nicer than the Ordinators, Kupo. Like they're all like, like Kupo. That's how like I did all of them. Like my voice got stuck that way. I went to the gas station driving home and accidentally talked like that a little bit because I had been talking like that for like 5 hours.
God.
Like it was just that was
your
You
life
know.
at the time.
that was my life. That had become my life. That was my life. That's still my life. And so what happened though is this became like part of the standard Mog mod
Mm-hmm.
that got shipped everywhere or on the internet. And so that's where my part of the story ends and Mog's part of the story begins.
Yeah, so of course, being a Moogle fan, I had the Mog mod, and I had the Morrowind Comes Alive mod that added all the Moogles that, you'd see like Moogle guards and Moogle shopkeepers and stuff like that. And then I just happened across this mod that added voices to all the Moogles, and I'm like, whoa, okay, cool. And they were
And this is like
hilarious.
1990,
I
so
loved
this
them.
is like 2004, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a while back. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And then, years and years later, what was it, like Anthrocon 2015?
No,
Think it
like this was like 2 years ago. Yeah, there was something. It was like 2015, 2016, somewhere in that. It was not so long ago. Like we had already
No,
met.
yeah, but just in conversation, a bunch of writers were hanging out in the lobby of the Omni Hotel, and Tempo just happened to mention that he voice acted Moogles, and I'm like, you voiced the Mog mod, and it's like,
And I just broke into like, yeah, I voiced the Mog Mod, Kupo, and he's like, what? And you can just like you know, Mog's face just went like he could not. It was like he couldn't believe this was some sort happening in reality. Like, oh, okay, clearly I am asleep or something. Clearly, this is really too coincidental that this guy, like, because like we'd seen each other around, I think, like we hadn't really talked. This was like our first real conversation, and we were just hanging out in the
Right.
lobby, like, and like, we just happened to be sitting next to each other, and I was just like, oh yeah, well, I've voiced the Moogles one time. You're like, oh my god, Mogmod. And yeah, and I was just like, and I started, being like, welcome to Anthrocon, like, oh no 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 no, and like, because like that's how I envisioned the Moogles talking. But this meant that Mog had spent like 10 years like having that be the main way that Moogles talk, because they don't talk in the games very much. Like, it's mostly text.
But
Like,
having your voice in his head every time
right.
he thinks about that game.
So I was right, and so like, and so Mog actually like knew what had been listening to me for like 10 years.
That is so weird.
Right. And like, it doesn't sound very much like my normal voice, and so when you hear me in real life talking, I sound much more deep and masculine.
Dear God.
But no, when I sound like a Moogle, I'm just I weigh like 50 pounds. Like, I'm fluttering around right now. Don't forget to save. Like, it's its own thing. And so,
Do you do this often? Is this like a party trick for you at this point?
no, this is like a D&D thing. This is like, that's like one of the voices. I'll use that same voice for like a fairy dragon or something. Like, I'll use that voice for like, something like, a baby dragon or something. It has to be like a magical thing. Then I'll bust out the Moogle voice. But it's always the Moogle voice. Like,
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's how Mog and I actually had our first interaction.
That is so
And then we
weird.
decided we were friends because
Just decided.
clearly we have to be friends now, because you're the only two people who care about this.
Oh my God.
And so like, and the thing is, like, that's in like Skyrim and stuff. Like, people are still using my same voice clips. Like, can we play some of the voice clips?
Oh, I've not been able to figure that out. The person who's in
Oh.
charge of this, yeah.
I'll see what I can do. Where are the...
Here, it's in
It's
the
been
it's in
posted
the
on-
Discord chat.
I see the Dirtbergs.
Okay, but yeah. Anyway, whenever you can get them to play, just start picking random ones. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and yeah, so that's the story of how Mog and I became friends.
Oh my word.
Show and tell.
Because through the magic of the furry fandom. But yeah, that's like the most furry fandom story. Like, and then 10 years later we were at Anthrocon, and I was like, I worked on this obscure thing one time, and you're like, I love obscure thing, and
Let's be friends now.
we are now friends. Boom. And then like, friendship unlocked happened, and but yeah, like so anyway, so yeah, like that's actually one thing I really enjoy about the furry fandom, though, is that
Yeah.
you can like, wherever you are, whatever you are involved in, if you are like putting things on the internet, even just like commenting or something, like whatever, or reading stories or looking at art, like you can years later in the furry fandom even just be like, oh yeah, I really like this artist. Oh yeah, like I commissioned this one picture from them. Oh, I like that one. And like you are just in this weird club.
Yeah.
You are in the weirdest club ever by being a furry, where you're just like, oh, like I didn't know that was you. Yeah, like, oh, okay, cool. Like,
Me, you be
the first
shiny
time I
and
got
brown,
recognized
Kubo.
at a
Oh,
con
God.
for something I'd written was a little surreal.
yeah,
Yeah, so
what?
I was in the stairwell. I was in the stairwell at the Westin, just going up to my room, and someone just happened to read my badge, and they're like, "Mog," and I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "Oh, you wrote so and so." I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." It's like, "Oh, I loved it." It was that was the first time I was recognized in public. That was pretty funny.
I'm just gonna play like one or two of the things from here. Yeah,
okay.
you guys won't be able to hear it
Awesome.
because it's not going through the mic, but yeah.
Okay.
Just,
Me, you be shiny and well, Kubo.
oh boy.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And I just played the one I linked there for you guys. Oh god. This is interesting to say the least. Like, what was your recording setup like? Because,
Primitive.
yeah. Okay.
You try my patience, tall one.
Noted.
I was in my friend's basement,
You're
and we were
boring.
using like his webcam mic or something.
Uh,
But like,
Can't you
has
see that I'm
become,
busy?
like it became one of like it became part of the standard package for how the Mog mod was downloaded, and it became
Nice.
like a central feature of it. And like it was never worth it for me to like go back and re-record them. And so
Okay.
like, but the thing is, like, the rest of the game, like a lot of the game takes place in like caves and like it happened, in like inns and stuff. And so like it doesn't matter that it's a little echoey for a lot of the time. It just sounds normal because that's where you are.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you can the ones up on the ones that say like there's a meter in the game that checks how much people dislike you.
Mhm.
And 10 is about like the best you can ever be, and then like 90 is about the worst you can ever be. And so the ones that are labeled like 90 are that just hate you. And then there are a bunch of like attack and run away and whatever ones like there's
Say
like an
your
attack.
words,
The attack
Kupo.
ones are all like, because the Mogs could jump really high. Right? No, they're like death from above.
Oh
Like
god.
they're because the Mogs have like a high
Alright,
acrobatic
Kupo,
skill and can
let's
glide and
dance.
stuff. So often they would attack you by jumping.
Boy.
But yeah, like it was good stuff. And so so and like a lot of them are like Stargate quotes or like Star Trek references or like just weird things in there because I thought no one would pay attention to.
Lo and behold.
Lo and behold, here we are.
I'm sure that you made a whole bunch of people very happy at the time.
I'm glad. Like it's and whatever. It's just that Mog is like the one person I have encountered in real life who's like the Mog mod. Yeah. And so, but anyway, so to get back on the topic of writing, so like let's talk about process a little bit.
Sure.
So when I'm starting on a new project, do a bunch of research and stuff. Like I'll throw mine out there, Mog, and then you can kind of jump in. Like, well, I'll just do a ton of research and then I do a first draft, and then I show that draft to editors, and which is usually just means like friends who have spare time, and then they tell me what they think of it. They point out any typos, and then it goes on to the publisher, and we'll talk about publication in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But like a lot of the and I assume Mog, that's pretty much what you do.
Actually, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Get my idea, do my research, write an initial draft, send it to the beta readers, I've got one that's particularly fond of a highlighter.
Mm.
Oh, cool.
He highlights repeated words and crap,
Yeah.
ly words,
Oh yeah,
uh,
adverbs.
adverbs. Yes.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
like, and the thing is, like, people, there's this idea when people say like, oh, I'm a copy or like I'm a proofreader. Well, like people think, oh, ooh, like that's a really specific skill. Well, sort of. Like, you do want people who like know how stories are structured and whatever, like you would see an editor do in, or what what people whatever. Like, is this character relatable in in say like a movie, like something? Oh, oh, yeah, your third act's all garbage. We gotta rewrite all of it, like that kind of stuff. But like,
Mhm.
what's really useful is to have a lot of different kinds of editor, because if you have editors who say are really good with people. Like, I have a couple editors who are really good at understanding how people think, and
Yeah.
they will jump in and say, when this character is doing this, he or she would probably feel like this because of this part of their background. And I would go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I'll go in and like add detail or change something or whatever. And then I have people who are really good at finding typos, and because that's just their deal. Like, they look at computer code all day
Grammar
or something.
Nazis, I think.
Well, and we try not to use that anymore because we just because there are
Yeah,
Nazi
fair
Nazis
enough.
now.
Fair
But
enough.
yeah, grammar. There are certainly like grammar fanatics who are
Grammar fanatics.
very who are quite persnickety.
Yeah.
And that's useful. You can channel that to positive ends. The
Use
there are
them for
also
good.
people, right? Well, and like, I have recently been really internalizing the lesson that every superpower has its origin in a weakness. Like, everything that you see someone is really good at is because they are kind of bad at something. And they have cultivated this as a response. So like,
Okay.
if someone is really good at finding typos, it's probably because they can't not see the typos.
Yep.
Like, they can't read a story without seeing the typos.
Would that like be sort of the writer's version of post-traumatic stress disorder?
What? Like, you can't see.
Like can't unsee a spelling mistake.
Oh, that's, yeah. I would think more of like a musician knowing you are doing something wrong,
Hmm.
like, or whatever, or a singer. I've met some professional singers in my day who are like, they don't like it when, like, I was taking voice lessons from like an opera singer for a while, and he was talking about how he hated having like the lead up to a, like, in like a pop song when they'll be singing, but they'll be like a swing of sound to get into their first syllable of their like new stanza or phrase. So they'll be like,
Yeah.
oh baby, I love you, like that. He hated that because that's technically incorrect. Like, you do it because you have not learned where the notes are really accurately on the scale. And so you
Mhm.
do it to kind of range find where your notes are for that, to where you're starting.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I hate it. Oh, I can't even listen to the radio. And so anyway, every opera singer is kind of a diva, by the way. The ironically, the but anyway, like, having various kinds of, like, I have some of my best editors don't speak like English natively.
Mhm.
Like, some of,
Yes.
because like because they have to translate. Like, two of my main editors are in Sweden and Poland, and another one's from Brazil, and like, they have to translate it into their native language in their head to then like see if it still makes sense. And
Yeah.
so like, if it's kind of, if there's a typo, like I used were instead of where, or something, they will go, whoa, okay, that's wrong, even if 5 other editors, let's say, looked at that same sentence and thought it was fine.
Mm. But I mean, like, there is definitely something into that. I mean, oddly enough, I've actually been on this topic for the past week because I have to do this with my students. But like one of the things that we're currently looking at is the very fact that like if we look at say multilingual societies, you'll find that even a large amount of the students, and this is something that I found out with some of the students from the university that I was doing my study on, that you'll find that they average out almost to like 65% ability, irrespective of whether they're first or second language. Particularly because what you'd find with a first language speaker is that they try to be more flowery in the type of like reviews or things that they're writing, whereas a person whose second language focuses very, very heavily on just getting the format correct, particularly because they know that that's where they might be sort of like lacking. So they focus so heavily on that, and then like the marks actively like average out to about 60%.
And you tend to get more focus, I find, on rules. Like the grammatical rules are known better by people who know another language, even in their own language. Like they'll still have that intuitive grasp of their native language, great, whatever. But like they'll be very focused on like, well, this is incorrect.
Yeah.
Like you need to go back and fix this, and often you do. You know, very rarely do I have something ungrammatical on purpose.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could always misplace a comma.
Right. No, like that sort of stuff. So like, you know, that's why when I tell people like who love to read, but say like, oh, I could never be an editor because I'm not a writer. Well, no, you don't have to be. Like you can be, you know, I have people who are like I've got like a biologist who likes to read my stories, and she doesn't really like give a ton of like, you know, insight into structure for story or anything. Like that's really not her bag. But if there's ever like a detail for a species that she's like, oh yeah, this like jackals often have twins. Oh, or whatever it is, you know, she'll throw that in there, and then oh, okay, well that's something I should work in there. Like how does jackal culture view twins? You know.
A friend of mine, TJ Mind, another furry author. We're in a mainstream writing group, the Cincinnati Fiction Writers, and it's actually headed by a professional author who's also a veterinarian. So that's a great resource. It's like, hey, how would a particular part of an animal look this way, or what kind of animal behavior does this animal do? So that's always really nice getting her feedback.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
and
that's
like, what are the different sensory abilities and behaviors and group structures? You know, that kind of stuff. Like it's super useful, and so and you can have that for anything. Like it doesn't have to be furry related. Like I've totally consulted people who know about a technology or a part of the world or whatever to even just for fan fiction. Like for my Rock Dog fan fiction, I like found Chinese and Tibetan furries and was like, make sure this is spot on for me. And they're like, how are you? How did you find me?
How are you online?
Right. No, like the thing is like they're all online. Like they like people our age and younger in China and Tibet and places, like they can get online. They're on FA. They're on SoFurry. They're on Twitter. Like it's just they're not supposed to be. But like you know, they're just not used to. They're not
that
used
is the
to.
laugh.
They're just not used to anyone like seeking them out to talk to them. Like, you know, they're not used to anyone like, you know, people will talk to them on, you know, online, whatever, just like furries talk to any furry. But like, they're not used to people seeking them out to ask about, hey, tell me more about, make sure I'm getting this stuff about, you know, for my erotic fanfic, right? And like they liked it. They were like, oh wow, you haven't been to China, but you're still writing it like this. I'm like, I watch a lot of documentaries.
Wow.
But yeah, like even stuff like that can be really useful. And like, I write a lot of fan fiction to practice for real fiction. You know, like and like original stuff. You know, that's why I write fan fiction, is so I can try out techniques and try to emulate how other people are doing stuff. just like an artist would try to copy the style for a show.
So with that sort of like in mind, Mog, what is the strangest thing that you've done to try to not break the immersion in any of the books or stories that you've written?
Well, I'm usually the type that is looking how to break immersion,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, fair enough.
no, looking actually consulting. I've talked to some mental health professionals and
Mhm.
probation officers
Mhm.
and stuff like that to get perspectives of like certain types of mental disorders for a character who is suffering a mental disorder.
Mhm. Okay.
And I back when I was a police officer, I had those resources, and it's kind of funny. There's you can get in touch with a lot of these people, um, like victim advocates and stuff like that, and just basically ask them, hey, do you have any clients in your caseload that need to discuss this thing? And you got to be tactful when you're talking
Yeah.
to victims of any kind of mental disease or trauma or anything like that. But you'd be surprised how often they say, yes, we actually have somebody who needs to discuss this and they would love to talk with you.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
that's the most extreme thing I've done, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings up a really good point, which is when you're a writer, you can ask anybody anything, but you should you can ask you can ask Officer Mog,
Mm-hmm.
how would I get away with murder? And he'd be like,
Right.
reaching for handcuffs, and he's like, but then you'd be like, because I'm gonna write a book, and he'd be like, well, let me tell you, like we've been talking about this down at the station for a year, like whatever it is, because people, yeah, because like when you're a writer, like oh okay, but the thing is too, like you have to be a little bit of like thought about how people are gonna like how you would feel being asked a specific question can really pay dividends. Like because like the more comfortable you make the person you're consulting, the more they're gonna open up. And so like if you say like when I was talking to Chinese furries, like I always made sure to be like to never like China-splain to them. Like I always made sure to be like, okay, so I'm pretty sure it would work like this, right? Like instead of, hey, so this happens and this happens and this happens, and one of those things might be completely incorrect, but it's like what I have seen in movies and restaurant menus or something, and so I assume it's how just all of China works. And they're like, they're like, oh well, this, but then there's also you would see this, but then that also means this. It also would imply that this is happening and whatever. So like, when we were talking, I was talking to one of them about in the movie Rock Dog, there is like the reasonable character named Dharma who is like trying to like, she is a young woman trying to be a musician, not a traditional like Chinese instrument or anything, but like bass guitar, and wants to be in like a rock and roll band. And so like having that information to me said, oh okay, well maybe she's maybe like her family's like like you're just playing some weird Western instrument and da da da, but I guess I've heard it around and it's not as glamorous as playing electric guitar and whatever. And they were kind of vague notions. Whereas when I consulted this guy from China, he's like, she knows how to play piano. I'm like, why? And he's like, because every kid who shows any amount of like inclination toward music gets piano lessons in China if their parents can afford them, because it's what you do. Like, just like if you had any inclination toward sports, you might have been on a sports team in middle school or something. It is just what you do. And so having that insight meant like, oh okay, now I know this other thing about this character. Or like I would oh well, if she talks like this, she talks with this accent in the show, therefore that implies this about her background, or whatever. And this isn't just for fan fiction. In fact, you can do this in reverse. Like you can say, hey, I'm writing a character who's, got these background elements, and is from your part of the world, or is from your culture, or whatever, or is like from your background, and like if it's profession or something, what would that tell you about this person? And just kind of let them go about it. Like, if I turned to Mog and said, hey, I'm writing a cop character who, or there's this character in one of my stories who, let's see, is like, I'm gonna make him be like, he's kind of been stuck at a low level for a long time in the department. He always got in trouble as a kid. He only really gets interested in the job when there's someone to arrest.
Fun.
Mog should probably tell me a lot about that guy because he's met that guy. I bet.
Okay.
Like someone whose persona would be like a German Shepherd or something, and maybe with a little bit less discipline, and it's just like, oh, bad guys.
Okay.
Like, because that's a specific cop archetype.
Yeah.
Like when I've worked with police officers.
I've worked with some super cops. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And like the thing is, they're not always bad guys. Like some of them are totally reasonable dudes, but that's just like they're not in it for the same reasons that a lot of the other people are in it. Like you don't see that archetype a lot in TV shows because it's not a good main character personality.
Well, I mean, they tend to portray them oddly, if they do exist.
Right, and like versus say like the archetype of the detective cop, like whether or not they're literally a detective, like the detective cop who comes in and is like gonna frickin' piece this together, gonna do all the whatever, they're I got a good read on you, I'm gonna put all the information together, whatever. Like when you talk to police officers, like Mog, like what would you say are police officer personality archetypes? Like just like even 3 of them.
Okay, so we touched on the super cop, and that's the eager beaver, the one who always tries a little too hard.
But only in like
there's,
I've noticed there's an eager beaver, and then there's the like who tries hard in everything. But then there's the eager beaver who is like in it for the action.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's definitely the adrenaline junkies there too. I mean, but every cop at heart is an adrenaline junkie. It's 98% waiting around, 2% adrenaline, and we're all in it for that 2% adrenaline. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That's why we're all there.
Otherwise, they'd be otherwise they'd be reviewing footage for 8 hours a day or something.
Yeah, which is half the job.
Yeah, I sure love my.
Depends on where you are, but yeah, like there's totally people in department. Yeah.
So.
But anyway, Mog.
Another one I would say would be the. Well, there's always a yes man. That's the person who's always sucking up to the brass, and they usually tend to get promoted, much to the dismay of everyone because no one really likes them.
Because they're less involved in lateral connections with the people in their department than trying to connect upward.
Right.
Like
exactly. Yeah, you don't trust them. You don't trust them to have your back. In fact, you expect them to stab you in the back. So, yeah, but definitely worked with a few of those types. And I'd say overall, I mean, the overwhelming majority of, I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but the overwhelming majority of police officers just want to help make the world a better place. It sounds, it does sound cliche, but I mean, that's honestly.
And they're the people who don't get fired.
I have heard of.
Yeah, well,
they're often the people who don't get fired too. Like the people, at least in the departments I've worked with, like the guy who actually pays attention in training and has patience with people and isn't really like hoping to go out and arrest someone, like just wants to make the world is that's actually like what you want.
Yeah. So,
and in all honesty, that's 90% of the department. It really is.
Yeah, and those don't tend to be the characters in like action movies about cops because that would be less
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely not.
And so like some of these, so like but the thing is, like, even just knowing that police departments, for example, like that little tidbit where he's like 90% of the people there in a police department in some city in the US, 90% of the people there are just like, oh my god, like I'm really just here to freaking like solve crimes and like, you know, make sure that, criminals who do stuff get punished and get the people, if you didn't do it you go free or whatever. Like they're in it for the right reasons, even if they sometimes like get exhausted or frustrated or whatever. Like you can have a broad range of dramatic reactions, but knowing that most cops aren't, you know, the guy from damn it, the one
Moonbeam
where
City?
it's Christmas and he's in the tower and he's a cop from out of town. His name is John. Die Hard.
Oh yeah, Die Hard.
Die Hard, yeah.
Most are not John McClure or whatever his name is.
McClane.
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 Yeah.
John McClane.
Yeah.
Or Dazzle
Yeah,
Novak.
because-
Best Christmas movie ever.
Right.
Hmm.
And it's and it makes for great storytelling, but most cops are more like the one friend, that one guy who befriends him, like the
Yeah.
black cop played by the dad from Family Matters, from the
Right.
Steve Urkel show. Like
Uh,
most are more like him, where they're like, oh my god, can't believe this is happening.
Could just stop.
Right, and like the thing
Yeah.
is, knowing that informs you a lot. It makes you have more realistic stories than just the very limited range that like Hollywood would produce.
Hmm.
And so learning from movies is okay, but it's better to learn from, like, to supplement that with information from real people who have been in that field. And
So-
yeah.
Yeah. So Emmy has been waiting for a while to have us ask the question. In the question, do you ever consult books about biology? Now, this is obviously connecting to a large amount of other things. So, consult books about biology, environments, or behavior to improve your furry writing, and what are good ways to find people to consult in respect to that?
Do you want to take that one, Mog?
Oh yeah, I can definitely start. The answer is yes. I mean, I have a copy of Grey's Anatomy just for the sole purpose of learning how the body works. Say an organ shuts down, what happens then, and so on and so forth. I have various reference books, like fantasy reference books, occult reference books, just stuff that I might need. So there is that. The internet is a great source for just about anything. Wikipedia, I would say, is a good source for finding out where to read more about a topic that you want to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a
That
good
whole
way to
section
find
is-
people to
At the bottom
go ahead.
of the Wikipedia entries.
yes,
Yeah.
the further reading and the citations for sure. As far as finding people to consult, the Furry Writers Guild actually has a thread about what kind of life experience you have, and that's a good place to start. You can if you can't find specifically what you're looking for there, you can usually find somebody who has worked with somebody in that particular field and can ask the questions or make an introduction.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, the internet is always great. You just like, okay, well, I need to find this biologist. Let's search for a biologist. And, you bring up a college website where you've got these professors of biology, and some of them are kind enough to actually talk to you. You can give them a call and they'll actually say, hey, I'm writing this story. I'm writing this book. What would happen in this scenario? And they'll actually talk to you about it. It's pretty interesting. It's fun talking to people about something you're writing.
People seem
and
rather
they're-
open. Sorry.
Oh yeah, they're especially open, I find, because I do that too. If you already have bothered to look up what they've put out.
Oh,
Like, so if you find a TED Talk or a paper or an article by them, like, and you say, okay, so you talked about these points, but I have this specific subcase because I was reading your article on this, and I have a question here, and then they will be happy to talk to you because you're not just being too lazy to Google it.
Mm.
Like, you're actually asking like an expert in that field a real question they might have an answer to or could speculate on. And that makes them a lot, like, once you demonstrate that you are putting in the time, because nobody likes it when you come in and say, I'm too lazy to look up this, but can you just tell me? Like, if somebody was like, you're from North Dakota, I'm like, yeah, well, I have some questions. Okay, what's the capital of North Dakota? And I would probably, walk away.
Just
I would, right. I'd be like, why, like, unless this was a really casual conversation, if they were like, I am, hey, no, I got some really important questions that I really, to help me write my book. I'd be like, okay. And they're like, okay, so like, does it snow? I'd be like, oh my God. You better be, you'd better be from like, the Amazon or something. Like, you better be from really far away. And
There's a
ask
really-
to ask this question.
There's a really nice website I like to use when people ask super obvious shit like that. Let me Google that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
To make the point.
Yeah, it's a great resource. I love it.
Right. And like, that's the, like, I've had really fascinating conversations with people in the process of researching for these books. Like, even just the Tempo talks sprung out of that. Like, the Tempo talks for Culturally F that I do sprung out of me consulting people for books and for other projects, just to say like, okay, hey, so what's the deal here? And so like, I'll talk to, I would talk to like a guy who does animatronics and be like, tell me more about how this works. I have some specific questions here. And do you have any like photos of this stuff when it was, when you were building it or after? And like, people love to talk about their passion. So as long as you're talking to people about what they are into, they'll talk to you forever. Like, we've all had people where like you mention like trains or something to them and they're like, my God, let me tell you about trains, sir. And that and that's great. Like, that's what people love to talk about. And so if you can kind of leverage that to find, by finding people who love to talk about stem cells, then you can be like, okay, well, now I had a 2-hour conversation about stem cells with this person, like, and often, like, if they're local to you, it's often worth it to just like go be like, I'll buy you a coffee, let's go hang out. If they're not, like, even email or phone, like, usually emails what they are most receptive to, I find, like, because then they can kind of answer it whenever.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the other thing I was going to mention is never underestimate your own social circle. Like, you probably, like, each one of us probably knows somebody who's in some weird field we hardly ever think about. And so like, if you just kind of ask around, like, let's use the law enforcement example. Like, if you were like, hey, I want to write like a detective story and need a cop to show up because there was a crime.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I need to know how that cop is going to act. Well, I will talk to, there's this, you can buy books on it and whatever, but you can also just say, who do I know? Like, you could talk to your friends, talk to your family, and be like, hey, like, do we know anyone who actually like works in law enforcement or whatever? It doesn't matter what it is. Do we know anyone who like is a pharmacist? Yeah, like, I think so and so's a pharmacist, right? Yeah, okay. And then you go and you like buy them lunch and they hang out with you and tell you all about being a pharmacist.
And I mean, like the lived experience conversation is probably a lot better than having to. I don't know. I would always find that the vast majority of books might be a little, I don't know, clinical in the way that they deal with particular things if you have to read about them. I mean, versus actually having the conversation, because I feel like the idea of hearing the excitement or the emotions that they go through when they're actively speaking is probably a lot more, because obviously you as a person who's writing a character needs to see the emotions that these people are going through when they are talking about the topic. I mean, like,
oh yes,
go. Sorry.
It definitely can help give depth to your character. Like using the pharmacist example, if you talk to a pharmacist and they talk about how they do their job and what they like about it, what they don't like about it, it can make a really two-dimensional character become a three-dimensional character very quick.
It colors them.
Yeah, and like, even if you only have a really short amount of time to talk to them, like to get a feel for their whole profession, like say you're on an airplane
Mhm.
and you only have like just you got like half an hour left on your flight and it just has come up that the person next to you is a pharmacist.
Mm.
You'll be like, hey, my favorite thing to ask them is like, how is it different from what people expect it to be?
Mm.
Because like, oh, okay, like in TV shows you're like this, oh, how is it different to be an accountant than what people expect? And because that gets people telling you stuff you don't already know.
Yeah.
And then my other favorite thing to ask them is like, what is the weirdest thing that has happened to you in
In
this
that
job?
particular, yeah, profession.
Because that will give you simultaneously what's normal and what can happen.
Huh.
So like when I worked in drug rehab, like a kid got bitten by an otter one time.
What?
And like that was the weirdest goddamn thing that ever happened to me on that job. And it indicates to you like that basically like what happened was when you are like I was in teen drug rehab. I was working with teens and like you can't take them anywhere. Like teenagers don't like to do anything. They like to hang out with other teenagers.
Mm.
Like they don't want to go to like, they want to go to like the mall and hang out with their friends. They want to go to like, whatever, skate parks and things. They want to go and hang out at someone's house. But when they're in rehab, they can't because they can't
Yeah.
hang out with their friends because their friends are where they got all the drugs. And so they, we're like, oh crap, well, where do we take them? Because they don't want to go to the museum. They don't want to go to like, oh, hey, there's a really cool ballet in town. No, I don't want to go to that. And so like, oh, do you want to go to this like, theatrical production? No. Why would I want
Do you
to?
take them to ballet?
Well, so like whatever of all the things on offer, you end up taking them to places that they're like which is about as good as you'll get from most teenagers. If my
Yeah.
experience as a teenager is correct, like that's about as excited as you will ever be about most things that adults suggest.
Can
And
confirm.
so, yes. And so, like, do you want to go to the zoo? Okay, cool. We're going to the zoo. And then, like, at the zoo, they were goofing around, and they like kept sticking their fingers in the otter enclosure until one of them got bitten. And
That was the coolest
like,
thing that happened.
that was the weirdest thing that happened because we kept the staff had kept telling him like, don't stick your fingers in the cage. Don't throw things at the prairie dogs. Don't try to touch the goat. Don't try to do this. Like, and so finally, like, he went and stuck his fingers in, and it was this cool kid, like, cool, dressed like kind of a, gangster, kind of like sideways hats and like, like, too nice to play basketball in basketball jerseys and like just cool, like baggy pants, cool guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Mm.
dude, you're from Bismarck, North Dakota. Like, I've met your mom. You dropped off your clothes.
Small town syndrome.
Right. I'm like, dude, like your mom has been here. Like she came in. I bought you this hat. Mom, you're not supposed to take the stickers off my hat, yo. Like, and I'm like Bartholomew or whatever his name. Like.
How's your rap career going?
Right. And yeah. So then
Oh,
he like.
okay.
So then he kept so I came on shift after he was already he'd been to like he'd already gotten like the good cop bad cop from the zookeepers for like, oh, we could press charges against you for animal endangerment and, and the other one's like trying to make it a teaching moment. So when I came in, like she was like, mustelids have some of the highest bite strength per pound of any mammal. And he's like, that's so interesting. And like as they're like wrapping up his finger, and so they're they like then we had to take him to the hospital, because he got bitten by an animal. And the other teenagers in the group were like, oh, this is the worst. And I'm like, you shut up. Because now we have to go to the hospital because neither of you stopped him. So we
Okay.
all get to go now. Like, and so
Hooray.
because what happens in the otter enclosure was that the zookeeper explained to me, the good zookeeper, not bad zookeeper. Bad zookeeper was like, you're lucky you didn't lose a finger. Like, bad and good zookeeper was like, you know, if you stick 2 fingers through the chain link fence at the top of the otter enclosure, it looks like frogs' legs. And otters eat frogs. And I'm like, huh. Because like what happened was like at the bottom, like, I don't know, 5-10 feet down, there was a pool and a little area where the otters were standing on rocks. And one of the otters, like the kid sticks his fingers through and the otter goes, "Brrrp," and like looks up at him, apparently, and then like dove into the water, swam really fast, squeaked up the plexiglass, and bit him on the finger. And so anyway, because there was a sign that said "Don't stick your fingers through the chain link fence," and so we go there, and his mom and his little brother show up, and like his mom's filling out paperwork, and his little brother's like, "What happened?" And the kid's like, "I got hurt," and I'm like, "No, please tell your younger brother more." Like,
Oh, God.
"Well, I got bitten by an otter," and he's like, "How?" You know, his little brother, the kid's like 15, and his little brother's like 10, and his little brother's like, "How'd you get bitten by an otter?" He's like, "It's not important. I mean, whatever." And I'm like, "No, please continue."
God.
We have had to devote like an hour and a half already to you. Let's continue this. And he's like, "Stuck my finger in this cage." And his little brother's like, why would you do that?" Like, and he's like, "It's not, I don't know, whatever, it's not important." And I'm like, "Dude, no. Please explain to him. I would also like to know why you
Finish the
stuck your
train of
finger in
thought
the
for
otter
us,
enclosure,
please.
because I wasn't there. So why don't you bust that out for me? Why don't you lay down that for me?" And he's just like, "Whatever. I mean, it was just like, no, it's not important. No. And so finally we get like, and so like, but his little brother's like, "That's really stupid." Like, after 5 minutes of silence, you know, he's like, "That was really stupid to do." And I'm like, "This kid's, I'd listen to him. Like, he seems to have it figured out."
This kid's
And
got
so
a
we
good
get
head on
back.
his shoulders.
Right,
Yeah.
like he'll be fine. He probably won't end up in rehab. And so, but anyway, and like, so we get back, and like, you know, this kid gets back, and he's telling the other kids who didn't go to the zoo, like, oh yeah, there are all these otters, and it was like, you know, fighting them off, and you know, usually, you know, they had baseball bats, like they were, you know, like, and I come by, and I'm like, you know, like, I don't remember, his name was like Anthony or something. It's a really normal name, and I'm
Yeah.
like, you know, he that wasn't actually his name, but you know, he was like, you know, hey, like, I was like, you know how like when a bear kills someone, they always, like, when a bear eats someone, they have to kill the bear. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, it's because humans are delicious. And he's like, shut up. And I'm like, no, dude, like, for real, they have to do it because like they'll get a taste for human flesh. And he's like, shut up. And I'm like, but otters, no one's gonna kill an otter. They're too cute. And he's like, shut up. And I'm like, dude, I'm just saying, like, you should lock your window tonight. You're gonna look over, and you know, like, you might look over and you might just hear a little on the window, and it'll be like, suddenly otters. That'll be the end. And he's like, shut up,
Suddenly
dude, shut up.
otters.
Another with a chip on his shoulder.
Right. Like, oh, you were told all his friends how delicious you were. You know, and but the thing was, like, that was the weirdest thing that ever happened at that job. Because, like, and the story demonstrates all these other normal things that happen. Like, it is normal to have a bunch of, like, people be like, I don't want to be here. I'm tired. I wish I was anywhere else. Like, I'm gonna push the boundaries because I'm bored. You know, like, on and on.
I'm
I'm gonna
edgy.
try to myself. All right, I'm gonna try. All right, I'm gonna try edgy. I'm gonna try and make myself sound cool. You know, and having that be like, having that explanation, having that weird little story means that you can extrapolate a lot of details about what that job is like, because then you know that, like, there's a central location we go back to that's like a house, you know, and like that has, you know, like, that's where the residents live, and that, you know, that we have to take them on day trips, and you know that we have to respect, you know, like, we have to bring their parents in, and da 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 da. Like, it gives you all these little details, but it's all fun to listen to, and the person who has done that will be willing to tell you that story because they remember it really well.
Yeah.
And so
Huh.
yeah, like, that's what I recommend when you find someone, is to just be like, what's the weirdest? What is different from what I see on TV and movies, and what is the weirdest thing?
Yeah.
Because, yeah. So
Alright.
that's how I recommend to mine resources for plot resources.
So, I mean, closing points, Mog, if you want to start us off, is there anything you'd like to talk about as we're
You should
sort
talk
of
about
wrapping up?
projects you're working on, Mog.
Yeah, projects that you're working on.
Oh, projects I'm working on. Well, I'm working on 3 novels.
Mhm.
Been working on them for a long time, so that's nothing new. um,
But for the people
I
who
did,
haven't listened to before,
yeah.
what are your projects?
okay, so I've got a fantasy novel that's like I'm aiming for like middle grade. It's a coming of age story about a group of knights that ride dragons. Trying not to rip off Pern too much, but always worried about that. Now I've got another
As long as they're not
sci-fi.
also
That's,
bugs.
what?
Like,
What's
as long
that?
as they don't have insect eyes, then you're
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
As long as there isn't threadfall.
Hmm.
Oh no, the strandfall is here.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's more just like incorporating what I know about feudal society and stuff like that into it. So, then there's the sci-fi novel, which is more hard sci-fi. So, I actually had a mathematician check some math on, like, hey, what kind of velocity would a 120-ton tungsten slug have when it's accelerated to 1/32 of light speed? You know,
Mm-hmm.
Or like, what kind of
What's
effect would it have when it
what's
hits
it
stuff?
Yeah.
yeah. What kind of kinetic force would that have?
I think the answer is a metric fuck ton.
Yes.
So,
Give or
like,
and then
take.
there's and then the third one, which is still pretty much in the research and planning phase, is a bush pilot that goes down in northern Labrador in Canada
Mm-hmm.
and has to survive.
Huh. Is
That's,
it possibly called a Labrador in Labrador?
No, these are actually mainstream projects.
Oh, okay.
They're not furry.
They're not furry.
No.
I mean, the dragon one has dragons in it, so
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. That I guess I can forgive you then.
Nothing bad ever happens in the Labrador Peninsula.
Hmm.
Yeah.
so
I would live
Yes,
live on the Labrador Peninsula. Seems like a nice place.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right.
it's
I think-
if I remember right, it's actually a rainforest.
What?
So
Hmm.
no dogs?
It's what? No,
No, well,
Labradors are waterproof.
Yeah. Fair enough.
That's why
They
they're
do like to
waterproof.
swim.
Yeah.
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 With regards to that bush pilot going down in Canada kind of thing, there's a game like that, The Long Dark, I think it's called, which
Oh yeah, I love the Long Dark.
yeah, right, cool. Glad you've heard of it.
Yes, so yeah, I'm not really taking much inspiration from the Long Dark because it's as realistic and as brutal as it is. It's still not, it's like totally iced over, and it's a little bit out there.
There's no
Yeah.
there's no real like story attached to it. It's 100% a survival thing.
Right. Well, they were working on a story mode last I heard.
Really?
Yeah. One of the updates actually added a couple chapters to the story mode, so it was interesting.
Interesting.
I did win the Leo Literary Award for best poem at last Anthrocon. My
It only
poem
had
Top
one
to Bottom.
word. It was Kupo.
Yes.
It was people were like, we all put on our berets and we did finger clap, or like we did the snap when we're like, whoa. We're very bohemian.
Mm.
Gets up there, he's just like, Kupo, and we're like, oh,
Oh God. Okay.
how revolutionary. Poetry will never be the same.
Yeah.
But
Right.
something I just realized about that poem, actually, the illustration for it is reversible. It's just like the poem, and that's something I didn't realize until I was reading the poem upside down, and I was looking at the illustration. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, they did a really good job with this.
Oh, nice. That's actually really cool to hear. Actually, it's
Yeah.
Yeah, illustrations are like when the illustration clearly like indicates that the artist liked your work, it's super flattering. Like they
Yeah.
actually bothered to reread it and they actually thought about it and stuff, and that's super rewarding.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. So are you working on anything else, Mog?
Doing the Heat story. It was actually my RAR story,
Okay.
and so it's mostly done. I just need to clean it up.
In the furry dialect, we have to differentiate between rar and roar.
And roar, yeah.
Oh,
Like-
yeah, fair enough.
Just the
Um,
fact that there's an event like that acronyms or that acronym goes out to roar is rar is
Rar.
interesting. Like I love it.
It's
Well,
a little
it's-
bit more. Yeah,
Regional
it's a little bit
anthrop-
more sassy.
Yeah.
It's rar.
Regional
Not
anthropomorphic
roar.
writers retreat, right? And
Yeah.
that
Yes.
reads as rar.
RAR, yeah.
I can just imagine, like,
highly
it's just a whole bunch of sassy authors on one, in one place.
Rar. That's all they. Yeah,
And I
rar
was-
at each other.
Rar.
I was there with Madison Keller, Gullwolf, Pyro Stinger, PJ, and Mino.
Yeah.
Mino, I believe, doesn't have anything published as of yet, which surprised the heck out of all of us because she was like really good.
Hmm.
So, but it was just such a blast. Every aspiring author with the ability to go should definitely apply. It's like, are you familiar with the Clarion event?
It's basically the same thing. It's like a retreat. I think Kyle's been to it. He told me about it.
Yes. Kyle and Ryan have both been to it, and Kyle and Ryan are both instructors at RAR.
Okay.
So it's basically like a very compressed version of Clarion. And,
Which is basically a
it's-
summer camp for writers.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and it is intense. It is very intense, but it's so worth it. I mean, it's just absolutely great. So if you're an aspiring author, definitely apply, because it'll just give you such a jump start on everything. You learn so much in just a week.
Nice.
What's your Heat story? Just quickly.
Otters and Dragons.
Okay. And it's
By name and by
Otters and
function?
Dragons, a romance. Like
No, it's okay. So
Noodles
basic
of-
overview is
noodles of the sky and sea.
yes. So there's this wingless drake that wants to attain the wealth and power of the greater dragons, of course.
Mhm.
So they give him this hold, and it's a village of these anthropomorphic otters. But all these anthropomorphic otters really do is fish, So there's no wealth there. So it's about his journey to discover the wealth of the hold, and that's the title, Wealth of the Hold.
Okay.
And yeah, and it's a Heat story, so there's fun times. So
Right.
Ooh.
He discovers the wealth is wiggles and squeaking.
yeah,
And so he then instead of a mound of gold, he sleeps on he sits on a mound of wiggles and squeaking. Erotically.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, like, where are we going?
And on that bombshell,
On that bombshell, I think.
So I am working on, let's see, I just finished, let's see, first of all, the big thing is Windfall 2, which is Windfall, Otter Body Experience, and Other Stories, is coming out at MFF. Thank you. And that's coming out at MFF, and it'll be online shortly thereafter. It is, like I said, it's a continuation of the previous. It's a continuation of the previous book, like the first book. It's the premise of the main story in it, like the actual novella. Here, I'll send you an image. This is the cover. This is being released publicly for the first time on air. It hasn't been posted anywhere yet.
Sweet. Do you mind if we post it onto our?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sweet.
Go ahead. It is the main story is that Kylie the otter and Max the husky swap bodies and can't swap back because they find magical 90s snap bracelets that swap their bodies. And so the rest of the story is them trying to figure out how to get swapped back. And in it they like gain a like deeper appreciation for each other and their own struggles, and one of those like, you know, if we all put our troubles out on our clotheslines, most of us would run out and get ours right back instead of anyone else's.
You've taken
Right,
90s like movie plots to the next level.
Right, it's right, because it'd be like a Freaky Friday kind of thing. But in this one I tried to do it a lot more like biologically, like when they switch they don't know how to see like with their new bodies right away, because when you're looking you don't actually like, you know, all those veins on your eye, like,
yeah.
you have those on the inside of your eye to feed like the receptors and things, cells, and so when you're looking your brain's just erasing those little lines, and you can see them sometimes when you get like flashes of light. Say you're driving along a road and there are trees and there's a sunset beyond the trees, the like flashes of light laterally will make you see the veins in your eye. Or like say you're getting an eye exam and you'll see the veins in your eye. You see those all the time, your brain just scrubs them out of the picture. And so they switch and then they're like, I am just seeing a bunch of veins. I don't even know what I'm looking at. What am I looking at? Why is there kelp? And
is there kelp? Okay.
Right, it looks like kelp, you know, to Kylie because she's an otter. And you know, like then Kylie basically like gets really excited about being gigantic, you know, because she's like, cool, I could just like destroy branches and stuff in front of me and kick down doors, and like it's like power armor. And Max is like, no, I need that body back, don't damage it. And yeah, like he has to like learn how to run around with a different sort of tail and not fall over and whatever. Like the
You already have an interested reader in Trace, by the way.
good.
Yes.
I'm glad.
That cover looks awesome, dude.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
really does.
I'm really excited.
I'll
about
post it to the chat for. Wait, I can't. Can I? No, it's not a link.
Oh, I can make it a link.
Cool.
But anyway, and so like that's the main deal for that story. Like they have to basically like solve the mystery of how to get these things off, because the bracelets just won't come off. And they're like, you know, in the process they have to learn how each other, you know, how the other ones all like, they both have to learn how the other one like gets by in the world and interacts with people and stuff like that, because they are like, you know, they have to kind of like pose as each other for a little bit but not a ton. Like they're both pretty like reasonable about it. They're like, you know, let's just mostly stay home, because like I didn't want to have it be a cliche body swap story where they're just like, oh, now you gotta pose as me the whole time. Like one of the only times that they do is when they talk to each other's parents, because they both are like, Max is like, oh well, you know, her mom just asked me a question and I was like, oh well, you know, I would do this, and gave a really reasonable answer. And Kylie meanwhile is downstairs going like, aha, Max never stands up to his mom, but now I'm Max and I have his phone, and so I will call. And so yeah, like,
okay,
there's a link.
Sweet.
But anyway, so I've been working on that, going on sale. It has a bunch of it has all the other short stories that are available on my FA, but they're all expanded. And it has internal and external illustrations by Slate. He did, I think, 6 or 7 new illustrations for this. Plus, it has the same chapter openers as the previous one. It has the same, more of the same. So, like, the previous one had like episode synopses for the show, the TV show they were on, and now this one has more of them. for every
Yeah.
chapter, every short
Yeah.
story. And then the from let's see. So I've been working on that. Goes on sale on Fur Planet's site after MFF, which is in the early part of December.
Mhm.
So by like December 10th, it should be online easily.
Yeah.
And then I'd be happy to send some signed ones to you guys if you need.
Aw, okay, yeah, sure.
Right, like now that we've figured out how to send things to South Africa.
Haha. In the best
so-
way possible.
Best. Oh my gosh, that was the most. That's an experience I will remember always. Is mailing things to you guys. Anyway, and so the other things I've been working on, I just finished up an episode of Culturally Effed, that is about DuckTales.
Ooh.
Indeed, that is the first line of the episode.
Okay.
And but you can't be mad because you did it.
I didn't do
guy
it.
who sings-
It's impossible not
the
to
guy
do.
who's it's true. The guy who sings that also sings the Chip and Dale's one.
All
Yes, they
right.
do.
Rescue
actually,
Rangers.
yeah.
Yeah. And let's see. So the gal who sings it in the new one, by the way, the gal who sings the new DuckTales theme, she sings it because she was a singer on Dancing with the Stars, where they performed it for one of the dances. They performed DuckTales live on the show, and people had to dance to it. And so she was one of the singers, and they liked how she did it, I guess. And so now she's the singer for the show.
Huh.
But anyway, like my point with DuckTales, like the episode is, it is an example of a reboot that's done really well.
Yeah.
Because it takes all of the stuff that worked before and keeps it. Like Launchpad is exactly the same. Like they almost had Launchpad voiced by the same guy.
Ooh.
It's just, I think they just thought, oh well, he's getting kind of old. We don't know if he'll sound too
Survive.
old now. Right, and they want to have him continue to be like. There's this little bit of unfair stuff in voice acting where they want the voice actors to. They're like, well, you're old, you might die. Well, yeah, true. I mean, if you're like 65, in theory, yes, you have a slightly higher chance of dying, but like, you can also die when you're not old.
Mm.
And so, it's sometimes, and so whatever. But like,
And then you get
They-
Uncle
they
Iroh
had
season
him-
3 of The Lost Airbender.
I was just thinking about that.
I love Uncle Iroh.
I love Uncle
the
Iroh
best.
as well.
I'm drinking hot leaf water right now. And so, anyway, but the thesis of it was basically like they are keeping all of the things that work really well and updating the things that were sort of like lacking. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know. Like, say you're a gal watching, like you're a girl watching DuckTales. The only girl characters who are in the cast are the housekeeper, who in the original one wasn't really super interesting. She was mostly just kind of like, a fuddy-duddy. Like, she was kind of fussy,
Mhm.
and she didn't go on the adventures. And then there was Webby, who like was mostly there to like think something was cute and inadvertently cause catastrophe. Like,
Yeah.
that was really it. Like, neither of them were terribly suited to adventure. Now they're both like the two most competent characters and most interesting characters in some ways in the show. Like, and yet things like Launchpad, they left completely alone. They're like, that's exactly how we're going to keep him.
Cool.
And so, yeah, like I examined, like, I did not know, for example, that, what's his name? Scrooge's rival, Glomgold,
No, Flintark Glomgold.
Flintark Glomgold, is South African.
What?
He was originally a South African character. And I'm like, no way.
Then he just
But yeah, then they made him. But then once Scrooge became, because Scrooge had become a good guy, for the TV show, the original TV show, they made him Scottish too, so he could be like a bad version of Scrooge. Because Scrooge started out as more of an anti-hero, like antagonist guy. Like, he was just kind of unscrupulous, and he was basically Glomgold. And then he had this South African counterpart, and they didn't want to, like, for no reason, pick on South Africans. And so they decided we're going to just pick on more Scottish people, I guess. And so, but yeah, like, because they're like, we don't want our, because I was reading some of, they're like, we didn't want our only South African character on the entire Disney Channel to be a villain. And I'm like, well, I guess.
Well, I mean, do you remember that it was in Avengers that like there was that one line, not Avengers, but I think it was the very first Thor that like they were doing the questioning of Thor at one point, and they're like, "Are you like a South African like military dude?" I'm just sitting here going, like,
Mercenarium.
"Mercenary, yeah." I'm just sitting here going like, "When did we all become mercenaries?"
There's like two things that South Africans in movies are like famous for, and apparently it's like nuclear scientists and mercenaries.
See, I thought you guys were famous for like being the place that aliens land in.
That's
No.
that one movie. Everywhere else, the aliens land in the U.S.
Yeah,
Or at Tokyo. Sometimes
Yeah.
they land in Tokyo.
Yeah.
and only
Um,
once in South Africa.
Mm.
Right. But then you had to like long-term care for them. Like they didn't
Yeah.
just show up and like, hey,
Yeah, we
were
we took them in.
right. You guys were cool about it. You're like, whoa, aliens, you can sleep on our couch, I guess. Like we're gonna try to fix shit. Um, but anyway, like Flintheart Gomgold was like he is like I forget what it is. Like he has like a whole thing where he's from the Valley of Limpopo, South Africa. Is that a real place?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. Okay,
Do
yeah,
you
so that's
find
where
the
he is
name to
from.
be
So he's
weird?
from the north.
Yeah, well, northish, most like close to Mozambique
Mm.
and Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like he is the world's second richest duck. And that is that is
Hey,
the deal. Right. And he
that's
is
how we got
he
that
is
rich.
right. But when he was invented by the Carl Barks is the name of the guy who invented DuckTales. Like what eventually became DuckTales. Like
I
in the
remember that
40s,
name.
50s.
Carl
Yeah.
Barks.
Carl Barks with a
Just
C.
not Charles Barkley.
No, that's different. That's different. Also, also, he's not Carl Barks with an X like
Yes.
your canine socialist persona. Like, no, this is he is an actual dude. Anyway, and so
We are the good
yeah,
boys.
right. So anyway, the thing is, we're talking about that, we're getting that come out. Culturally Aft is also like starting to do stuff in the YouTube studio in
Ooh.
Toronto. Like,
Nice.
so that YouTube contacted us and was like, "Do you want to come film there?" And I'm like, "Sure." I'm not gonna be able to ever, but yeah. So they like the guys who like the producer RK and Underwrite, the guy who does the music and art. He does mostly art these days, but yeah, they will be filming in there. And so that's where like when you see like really well produced YouTube shows, they're often in the YouTube studio.
Okay.
And that's why they have where do they get all this great equipment? Where do they get all this great set work? This is a heck of some this basement production is really impressive. No, they're filming it in YouTube studios that they have in like large cities, New York and LA. And so that's going on. I finished a Heat story. I turned it in last night. They are due today, unless you're Mog and you have an extension. And then and mine was about I noticed that there aren't really, maybe Mog can correct me on this, I don't think there are any poly relationships in Heat stories. I think there are plenty of three ways, like flings. But Mog, do you ever...
It's interesting you bring that up because my story is actually going to be like a massive relationship by the end of it.
Is it a relationship or is it like an orgy?
No, well, okay, so the orgy
Free
does
love
happen,
otters.
yes. But
Okay.
but no, it all comes back to developing strong family bonds with the entire tribe, and so
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Noodle
it's gonna be
canoodling
like-
abounds. Everyone will be untangling those noodles for weeks.
And on that bombshell.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, like I wrote a cute romance, that is basically a weasel, and an otter, or a weasel, and a draft horse.
What?
Like, and those are the three participants in the romance. So like, and it was built on this idea that like when we talk about love triangles in fiction, even if like in theory we'd be fine with someone being in a, you know, poly relationship, oh, you know, they're, cause, you know, not like it's even an open relationship, just like a closed poly, like 3 people who are like living together, they're all dating each other, they're all kind of just like doing their thing, even though like most furries would be like totally fine with that. We at the same time don't really ever think about it in and put it in stories. Like we tend to just be like, ah, there's a love triangle and then 2 of them got to compete for the other one so they can end up as a couple. Well, and I'm like, well, what if it didn't work out that way and it turned into a poly relationship instead? And that's the premise of the story. Is like there are these like 3 best buds who've known each other for years, and 2 of them started dating, and the third one, who kind of had a crush on both of them, was like, oh, okay, they ended up with each other. There's no place for me in their office. And this is compounded by them being weasels, and he's a draft horse, so he feels like a little bit out of place anyway. You know, he's like, well, you know, weasels are gonna just weasel it, so that's fun. And whereas like, you know, a draft horse, he can barely even live in the same apartment style as them. Like he has to, you know, he's just so much bigger. And so anyway, and
I did hear that right?
Well, and the thing is, there's no penetrative sex in this story between otters and between otters. See, otters everywhere. Between draft horses, their draft horse is not like having sex with anyone penetratively, because I thought it would be a stretch. And so
That's a pun. That's a pun.
See there. But anyway, and so I'm working on that. I have a book coming out through Thurston Howell. They're putting out my Sleep for Gamers book. It is a self-help book. I think I talked about it last time very briefly.
I think I also I might have read it. I think I did read it.
Yeah,
you sent me a proof.
It's basically, yeah. I thought I showed it to you. It is basically like a book about how to apply all these things that we have learned in neuroscience about how to fall asleep, and conceptualize them as ways that you would interact with a video game or a tabletop game. And so, like, you know, it's all about, like, you know, how am I going to stop, you know, how am I going to, like, the one I just added was, I watched this, it was actually a TED Talk, but they had this paper out that was talking about how if you make a list before you go to bed of the things you're supposed to do tomorrow, you won't lay in bed worrying about those things. And so you can fall asleep faster. And so I was like, okay, let's talk about saving before you go to bed. So you're going to save so that the next day you can pick back up again. And you're like, okay, I'm going to write out where I am, what I'm doing, you know, what quests I'm on. And that's how the whole book is. And so it's because I've noticed that there just weren't self-help books that were made for people our age. They're all just like made for our parents. Like almost
very
all
Jane
of the ones
McGonigal of you.
Yeah.
What?
Jane McGonigal, gamifying education.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Totally. Like making it into, you know, a memorable, easy to think of, non-stressful experience. You know, so like, oh well, it's because we have, because a lot of us, like if we have habitually trouble sleeping, we start to get kind of confrontational about, oh, I'm just gonna sleep. You can't stop me from sleeping. Sleep. Like, and you just like, oh yeah, I have to, and it becomes like a stressful thing. Whereas if you sort of like relate it to, oh, this thing I do for fun, then, you know, it is a little bit easier to, you know, just, you know, like we talk about like, oh, what are you, a fire type? Like Pokemon, like you can be a fire type, an ice type, a fighting type, a rock type, or whatever in this, and it means just like, what do you do when you're asleep? Do you overheat? Do you get cold? Do you punch around a bunch? Are you an ooze type? Do you just kind of like ooze out into weird positions? Are you a rock type or whatever? You just lay there. Like, what is it? Things like that. And we talk about like, is your partner also this? If you are flailing around in your sleep, you're gonna wake that person up, and then they will, be irritable or whatever. And things like that. And so we talk about like what specific tips are useful for you as like this type of sleeper.
My one
And so
flatmate
it's
sleeps
just
like a
basically set up like that.
No, that's actually really cool. I wouldn't mind a copy of that book at some point.
Yeah, like, and it's gonna be out through Thirst and Howl. They're gonna do an ebook and see how well it sells, and so it'll be available to you guys pretty easily.
Nice.
Sweet.
And so yeah, like, no, I'd be happy to show it. You can write a review. Obviously, that is the answer. Everyone will just all write reviews. No, for real though, I would like you guys to review of it, because like it's so outside my normal realm of writing that I don't have. People are not going to be looking for it.
Sure.
I
mean,
yeah. Anyway,
again, like if either of you guys do want to send us anything that you want us to review, more than welcome to it, because I think that's one of the sort of directions that we'll be going in with a large amount of the podcast things that we want to do. Is like, we obviously want to hear writers, but the thing is that like maybe at some point, like, and I'll just work out the logistics at some point, but like having little things like tidbits like pop up on a random day. Like, hey, book reviews for these particular people in sound if you didn't want it any other way.
right. No, yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, there are a lot of contexts in which, like, Mog, I'm sure you have contexts too, like, where you'll be, like, driving or something, and you're like, man, I really would be up for listening to an audiobook.
Yeah.
Even though I can't read anything right now.
Oh, that's my main source of media consumption these days.
Yeah. Like, and it's just, don't, like, podcasts, audiobooks, like, you have to understand, like, everything's so far away in North Dakota that anywhere I would go, I would have the chance to listen to part of an audiobook or a podcast. But even, like, cleaning the apartment, I will totally, like, turn on my wireless headphones and just listen to an audiobook while I'm cleaning.
Lucky you, Rodeo. Everywhere in the house. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I have to move my computer to a central location. I move my laptop to a central location.
Yeah.
Get your reception. I can't go too close to the microwave while it's on. It interferes with my headset. But yeah, like, the only other thing I was going to say was, now Furry FM is thinking about doing more content.
Yes. That should, especially when it comes to language content. Obviously, we have German content on Furry.fm. But the point from here on forward is to look into different content to ensure that we sort of maintain a particular thing rather than just Sundays, for instance, that we have like a proper sort of German-English mix-up of a whole bunch of things. So it's definitely in the pipeline.
Right. Like, I've volunteered my Tempo talks to be on whenever you guys want them. I think we were talking to some musicians who might want to have music by furry artists as a playlist that they could contribute. Mog was gonna come on and do extemporaneous poetry throwdowns, freestyle raps.
One of the other things was obviously looking at history, furry history. I remember that that's another thing we want to possibly look into. Yeah, and so I look forward to that. Like, I would totally be down for the Furry FM World Service. It's just on all the time, and people could just tune into. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, I mean, you should do it, because then people like, Mog and me would, be a little more able to consume furry media. Like, I don't listen to enough furry music or whatever. Like, I just wish I had more, like, and so anyway,
listen to some of the Matthew Ebel stuff. Really good.
I've talked to Matthew Ebel. I've met Matthew Ebel at conventions. He's a cool guy.
Matthew's music.
I still want to hear his recordings of Teabags.
He did it. Oh goodness.
That's amazing.
Okay.
So anyway, but
yeah. I think wrapping up is probably a good thing. We've gone almost an hour over the time that we wanted to finish.
Yeah. It is time to cut this short.
Mm.
It's true. Well, that's because you had double the author.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yes. I do want to mention one thing that I forgot to mention. Tomorrow, the 15th, Knotted 2 comes out. I have a story in that called Gift of the Goddess.
Ooh.
It's one I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in, and it has a very fun twist in it. So
Sorry,
look for that one.
I just read innuendo into absolutely everything that's said sometimes, and
There-
I
we
didn't want to
can't
read that
have-
innuendo.
This is why we can't have nice things.
Not with
Yeah.
a twist.
Whoa! I think that's a new Bad Dragon toy. That's coming out.
All right.
And on that,
Yeah.
And on that dong
Yeah.
shell, it's like a bombshell, but it launches just dildos everywhere.
Oh goodness.
Oh,
Ugh.
go away.
Yeah. Should just listen out for obviously in about the next 10 or so minutes. We're going to be starting up with a little bit of music, as always, after the podcast up until 12 o'clock our time. So that'll be for an hour and a half now. Yeah, and do continue listening. If you have any requests that you'd like to listen to, please do, let me know. The Furry.fm website is up. I am on it currently. Trace obviously says thank you guys for thank you. I was about to say for a ton of, but no, thank you guys a ton for a great podcast. Halcyon was about 11 minutes.
That was a really dramatic noise. That just
Yeah, I thought we were being abducted by aliens. Happy
I
Halloween,
think Mog
everybody.
was just abducted, but that's okay.
Pyramid
So,
head,
yeah.
is that you?
Down.
Halcyon mentions, noodling abound. That is their new favorite statement.
Right? No.
Yeah.
And,
But in any case, yeah.
yeah, canoodling. Canoodling is also my other favorite.
It is pretty cool. It's like
This
Canada and
is-
noodles at the same time.
Well, no, it means like
know.
having sex, but it's
Oh.
how noodles work in Canada, I guess. But yes.
I'm gonna spit up coffee if I keep doing it.
Anyway, all right.
Cool. Thank you guys for coming on.
No, but yeah,
once
like
again.
feel free to check out my stuff
Yeah.
on you can just Google Tempe and you can find my and just Fur Planet and you'll find all my books for sale and
Mhm.
stuff. You can also just find me on Culturally Aft where I'm doing a bunch of interviews with people and writing the scripts and stuff
Yeah.
for the episode.
And you, Mogul? Bloody
Mogul?
hell, Mogul.
yeah.
You have to get on.
I'm on-
You have
I'm on
to
Twitter.
find any Moogle related content. You have to like go on a special Google called Moggle.
Yeah.
Let me Moggle that for you.
Yeah,
It
so
requires a
I'm on
special
Twitter
antenna.
yeah, it requires a special antenna. You guys. So Mog _K _Moogle.
Mhm.
Um,
We'll
I'm on
if you
Furry
post
and,
it, if you post it to us in the chat, we'll post that on the links as well.
oh well, fine. I'll just do that. So
That
Furry
as well.
Mog -Moogle.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and that's about all of my online presences. So
Okay.
I posted yours just now in the chat.
okay, sounds good.
All right.
Anyway, guys, it's been great. It's been great being on again.
Yeah, it's great having you on
Absolutely.
again. We should make these sort of spaces in between a little bit shorter as well, so that we spend time inside the time.
Yeah.
We'll just break it up into 2 episodes.
Yeah.
We'll just pretend like this came out. We'll just delay half of this for next week.
Or that.
What? Hey, so we'll just record another intro right now. We'll be like, well, it's great to be back for our second weekend in a row, right, Mog? Yeah.
Right. It's good to be back again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Alright.
thanks again. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks. Well, yeah. We'll see you guys.
Cheers, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.